Okay, so welcome to this week's masterclass. Today, I'm going to be talking with you about how you can do more of what you want and less of what you don't want without feeling guilty. And I'll apologize in advance. I've had a bit of a cold, so I'm going to try not to cough or sneeze too much. Um, and we're going to do a little bit different today. Usually I have a presentation, but I just want to talk about this today. And at the end, we'll take any questions that you have on the subject. So, okay, when I say that I want to talk to you about doing more of what you want and less of what you don't want without feeling guilty, I know some of you are thinking that it's not possible, right? This can't be possible. But it is. Okay, and I'm gonna explain it to you today. And I hope that after today's session, you will start to see things in a different light for yourself. So, in order to talk about how we can do this, we need to talk about why we, and when I say we, again, I'm meaning women, are not doing it. And I think one of the biggest reasons that we continually do things that we don't want to do, things that kind of go against our desire, is our desire to make others feel good, right? We want them to be happy. We don't want to let them down. And this is known as people pleasing. And I looked some definitions up, before I put this whole presentation together on people pleasing. And I really like this one, and I'm just going to read it here to you that I found from thescienceofpeople.com. A people pleaser is someone who tries hard to make others happy. They often will go out of their way to please someone, even if it means taking their own valuable time or resources away from them. People pleasers often act out of insecurity and a lack of self-esteem. So when I think about that definition, and when I speak to women in my life and in my coaching practice about the reasons for doing things that they don't want to do, or not doing things that they really want to do, they usually tell me that it makes them feel selfish or guilty. In essence, we feel like we are being a bad person, right? If we say no to others and yes to ourselves. We have been conditioned this way. So it's completely normal. And like I said, in a large part, it is due to how we've been socialized as women. So we are taught that we should take care of others, put everyone else's needs ahead of our own. And if you look back historically, it was required of us to be safe, right? For survival. So for many years, women would have been incapable, if not going against the law, if they made their own money. So they needed to depend on mostly men, right, to provide for them. And in order to ensure that they would get this from men, right, get the financial support, they had to be liked. They had to do things that were pleasing to the man, right? They had to keep the house together and make sure that he was fed and happy and all of these different things. And so our safety depended on keeping others happy in exchange for things like money, food, and shelter. Okay, so again, our brain has not necessarily caught up and evolved to this point now where we are at, where we don't need that to be safe, right? We can depend on ourselves, we can create our own income, and we don't need to be liked by everyone to survive. But if you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know, and you'll have heard me talk about the primitive brain and its main purpose of keeping us safe, right? So in the example of people pleasing, again, this comes into play because back in the caveman times, we survived in tribes or clans. And in order to be a valuable member of that tribe, you had to be liked, right? You had to do things that your tribe members liked, that they valued. You had to be pleasing and satisfying to the group, right? Because if you did not, Or if you were not, they might reject you. And you weren't able to survive on your own the same way we are now. And so our primitive brain really can connect saying no to others, doing things that maybe displease others and please ourselves as death, right? It sounds extreme, and I've said it before in other master classes, like it sounds really dramatic. But if you think about your brain as another person whose sole purpose has been to keep you alive, just imagine the lengths it will go to in order to do that, right? If it thinks saying no might equal death, it's going to send off a bunch of red alerts, right? And make you feel really uncomfortable. So the first step is to acknowledge that people pleasing is totally normal from a socialization perspective and from a biological or evolutionary perspective, right? So this isn't unique to you, right? There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing broken. You don't need to fix anything. Your brain is functioning just as it should. Excuse me. This is literally a human design issue, not a you issue. The second step is to practice recognizing the difference between that authentic self, that primitive brain and your authentic self, right? A little trick to doing this is to notice when you're making decisions out of fear. So that could look like fear of letting someone down, fear of causing a confrontation or making somebody upset. Fear is always, 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 always generated by the primitive brain, okay? Never by your authentic self. The authentic self actually has no fear. And so for that, we can be grateful for the primitive brain, because without it, we would die, right? We would have no fear, no fight or flight triggered. And in times when we really do need it, and if we didn't have it, we wouldn't feel the fear and we would die. So in this way, again, you can be thankful for that primitive brain. And ideally, I think it would evolve to be able to categorize or like know the difference between someone chasing me down a dark alley with a knife and maybe saying no to someone's party invitation, right? That would be ideal. And maybe at some point that will happen. But for now, we need to use our authentic self and what's called the primitive cortex, the prefrontal cortex. Apologies, this is the sickness setting in. The prefrontal cortex, which is the mature part of our brain that can make decisions, right? So rely on your authentic self. What do you really want? And that prefrontal cortex to make a decision, as opposed to paying attention to the primitive brain, which is just going to offer you fear. Okay, so how do we do this? So first, I want you to really understand that nothing that you say or do makes someone feel anything, right? So I'll say that again. Nothing that you say or do makes another person feel anything. Feelings in humans are not triggered by actions. They are not triggered by words. They're triggered by our thoughts about those actions and words. And so unless you can control what someone else's brain makes your words or actions mean, you can't make them feel anything. Not happiness, not anger, not sadness, joy. That is out of your control completely. So when you go around trying to do things to make others happy, you're in a losing game, right? You're going to feel frustrated and you're going to feel resentful. So actions, right? Doing things and saying things, those are interpreted by our brain. They create a feeling, could be happiness, joy, confidence, sadness, hopelessness, whatever your brain interprets words and actions to mean, creates a feeling in you. Those feelings drive actions. We're motivated by feelings to do things or to not do things, right? So if you feel excited, you might be motivated to take a lot of action. If you feel hopeless, you might be motivated to just go lie down on your couch. So I describe all this to you just to reinforce the idea that by doing things that you think are going to please someone else, but that end up displeasing you, right? Like making you not feel good, you are in a lose-lose situation, right? Because if you can't make them feel good and now you don't feel good, then no one is necessarily happy, right? And you've pushed aside your authentic self, what is really true for you and what is really good for you. Okay. And that creates a lot of resentment. And so people pleasing tends to be, I don't want to say bad for relationships, but it can have negative impacts, right? Because we're doing things for somebody else that we don't want to do. We're pushing aside our authentic self, right? What's really true and good for us. They potentially still aren't even completely pleased or happy. Maybe they're not reacting the exact way we thought they would. And so we end up feeling a lot of resentment. And that is never good because resentment as a feeling drives and motivates actions that have us show up in a way in the relationship that is not from love, right? So if you're showing up in a relationship with the feeling of resentment in your heart, you are going to show up very differently than if you show up with love. So that's kind of my long-winded answer to why people pleasing is one, fruitless, and two, potentially very bad for your relationships. The second thing I want to talk about is that people pleasing tends to go hand in hand with the belief that making others happy makes us a good person, right? It is a good thing to do, that putting other people's needs ahead of our own is unselfish. However, when we do things that we don't want to do just to make others happy, again, it usually results in us feeling angry because we aren't honoring ourselves and our needs. And these feelings motivate, again, actions that are dysfunctional in the relationship, right? They increase resentment. We subconsciously interact with people from this place, like I said, of resentment and anger instead of love. So what I want you to consider out of all of this is, what does it mean to be good, right? What does it mean to be a good person? And what if putting your needs at the top of the priority list is good for everyone, right? So the way I see it, it does no good. For example, let's just use like a job that you really dislike. It does no good to stay in a job you hate, right? While lying to yourself and your boss and your coworkers, right, about how you feel, even if you're still performing well. Okay, it's likely impacting how you show up in your relationships at work and at home, because when we have when work sucks, right, we bring that home with us. And we have very little to give to others around us when we are using all of our energy to put this front up, right? To pretend that we are happy to do this thing, in this case, go to work at this job that we really dislike. And because we aren't living from a place of authenticity, we aren't being honest with ourselves, it becomes very, very lonely and depressing. And I will speak from experience because I did this for a number of years in my career. It becomes one of the loneliest and most depressing places I've ever been, right? To lie to myself and to others about how I really feel. When we make the decision to say no to something that isn't for us, okay, or that we don't want to do, I think it's the greatest act of love for ourselves and for other people in that specific relationship with us, right? So if it's at your job, then it's acting out of love for yourself and the people that you show up to every day at that job. If it's in your romantic relationship, it's out of love for yourself and your partner. Okay. When we show up from this place of love, when we show up authentically and we're saying no as a way to care for ourselves, there is no guilt. Okay. That is how you do things that you want to do, or that is how you stop doing things you don't want to do without feeling guilty. You do it from a place of pure love for yourself and the others that are involved. You recognize that there is no good in lying about what you want in order to try to make them feel a certain thing or not feel a certain thing, like disappointment, because you know that you don't have that power over their emotions, right? That is not how the human brain functions. Emotions are not created by the things that people say and do. It's created by our interpretation of those things. And you don't control that for other people. So knowing this can be very freeing, right? And allow you to start to make decisions that feel good for you, that you like your reasons for. And when we are acting from that place, we don't have any guilt, right? Because we are considering the other people, right? We want to show up for them in a loving and honest way. We honor that relationship with them and with ourselves, right? So I'll leave you then with that question to ponder, which is, what if you reframed people pleasing as just that, like what I just described? So people pleasing is not honoring yourself and your relationships. How would that change how you make your decisions going forward? And what if you saw people pleasing as not being honest with yourself and others? How would that change how you make future decisions? I'll leave you with a really quick personal story because it had a really big impact on me. And I think that it changed how I showed up in my marriage from that day forward. So this was not that long ago, several months only. But the story starts almost 10 years back when me and my husband got our first dog. And I really, really wanted this dog. And I'd had other dogs before and I loved having them. So I really convinced him to get this dog, or so I tell myself, right? And we got this dog. We still have him. And to be honest with you, I really never enjoyed having him. And for many years, actually, my husband would say, just rehome him, right? You're not happy with him. You don't enjoy taking care of him. Just rehome him. And I didn't want to do that, right? I didn't want to disappoint my husband. I felt selfish doing it, right? I'd made a commitment to this dog. I felt guilty. I felt all of these horrible things. And so instead, what I did was we kept the dog, but I act and interact with the dog and with my husband related to the dog from a place of resentment. And so a few months ago, my husband started this dog now, his name's Blue, is almost 10 years old. And so my husband starts talking to me about getting another dog, one that is better suited for our young son, because Blue is old and he's a bulldog. He's super lazy, right? He doesn't want to really take part in any activity. And my husband thought it would be really nice for our son to have a little puppy that was more active. And I got caught up in this idea, right? I was like, oh, I really didn't enjoy having this dog, but maybe it will be different. Maybe if it's a different type of dog, right? A different breed of dog. Maybe if I see that Rocky is interacting with this dog and playing and having fun, yes, this sounds really wonderful. And so I went to this place again of like pleasing my husband and my son and kind of pushing down these feelings that I have of like, oh, I don't want to do this again, right? I really don't want to have another dog again. And we get this puppy. And not surprisingly, those old feelings settled in again, those feelings of resentment, those feelings of like, I don't want to train and take care of a puppy. I don't want the puppy pooping and peeing in my house. I don't want to walk the dog 3 times a day. All of these things, but I was doing them again from a place of resentment, and also showing up to my relationship with my husband from this place, right? I complained a lot about the new dog. I made statements like, see, I knew it was going to be all up to me. I don't even want the dog and I'm the one taking care of it. And this went on and on and on for weeks. And my husband, like he did the first time with our first dog, Blue, said, rehome him if you're unhappy, right? And something kind of clicked and changed in me. And I was like, you know what? He's right. This isn't good for anybody, right? The way I'm showing up for this dog is not good. The way I'm showing up in my relationship with my son and my husband is not good. And I am unhappy. I am not happy coming to my home every day, having to take care of a dog that I don't want to take care of. And so I went to my husband. I was like, you know what? I thought about it and you're right. I'm going to rehome the dog. And at first, I think he was really kind of shocked, right? Because I've never taken him up on that offer. But he was supportive, and I found this dog a really, really wonderful home, a home where the woman had lost two of her dogs recently and was really, really looking to fill that space in their home. They had another dog who was so used to having other dogs around, and she was retired. She could spend lots of time with this dog and wanted to, right? She really wanted to spend time with him. The dog was going to be in a loving home, not one that was filled with resentment for him, right? And when I talked to my son about what I was going to do, he's only 4. Well, he'll be 4 shortly, so he was 3, I guess. I was just really honest with him. I said, look, mommy got this dog and she didn't think it through a whole lot, but she really doesn't enjoy, right? Looking after him, and he deserves to be in a home where the family is taking good care of him. And my son just said, okay, mommy. And he said goodbye to the dog and went to school and came home, and we've never had an issue since. And I think for me, the biggest realization was I think I may have just done an amazing thing for my family, an amazing thing for my marriage, right? I'm no longer complaining every day. My husband doesn't feel like, oh God, she's not happy. How can I make her happy? He's coming home to somebody, right, that isn't resentful and isn't showing up from this resentful place. So was it hard? Yes. Did I have to overcome those feelings of guilt and like I was going to disappoint my family? Yes, it was really hard. But they showed me, right, that it wasn't going to be as hard as I was making it out to be, that I wasn't going to truly let them down and disappoint them by doing something that was going to make me really happy. So I'll leave you with that story. Think about that and just ask yourself, right? This question of what if I reframed people pleasing as not honoring myself and my relationships? Okay, next week, we're back again on Tuesday because it's the week of Thanksgiving here in the US. And so it'll be Tuesday again next week at 11 a.m. And I hope to see you there.